Emotionless, but you don't know why though. You don't wanna be alive, but you don't really wanna die though. You only feel the peace when you asleep or with your eyes closed. They ask if you okay and you say yes. It's a lie though.
Simple things I never learned, like how to love myself, for example, and all the bridges that I burned. Cause isolation was a whole lot easier, but then I broke out of my shell like a rocket ship, training for the stars, maybe slightly overconfident. I was trying to cover up all the insecurities and all of the pain. If you're looking too hard, you're never gonna find what you really deserve. Take your time, cause the best things in life are always worth waiting for. I find it funny how we get all the things that we need when we ain't trying at all. That's just the way that it goes. The universe is a show and we ain't got no control.
If it's in your head, people think it's not a disease. I promise it gets better cause it happened to me. You're not alone if you ever felt like this too, cause you are just like me and I am just like you. People asking how you feel, you don't know how you feel. Everyone looking fake, you can't tell who's really real. Started bailing on my friends and started skipping hella meals. It's like a wound I couldn't see but I was trying to heal. I thank God every day just for saving myself. Was living fast, didn't give a damn about my health. Didn't think that I'd see 30, I was living in hell. And I was too proud to even ask people for help. Now I'm loving life and every single minute I'm living. Take advantage of the blessings every day I was given. Take a deep breath, relax when I'm stressing and tripping, cause life move way too fast, it could be gone in a minute.
If you're looking too hard, you're never gonna find what you really deserve. Take your time, cause the best things in life are always worth waiting for. I find it funny how we get all the things that we need when we ain't trying at all. That's just the way that it goes. The universe is a show and we ain't got no control. Not trying to say that you shouldn't dream, because you should, that's what's gonna set you free. Just have a reasonable expectation. Your soul is only on earth for a vacation. If you're looking too hard, you're never gonna find what you really deserve. Take your time, cause the best things in life are always worth waiting for. I find it funny how we get all the things that we need when we ain't trying at all. That's just the way that it goes. The universe is a show and we ain't got no control. she wears the crown, climbing high in this digital sky. MILTOWN'S besties battle cry. MILTOWN'S besties battle cry. The legend of Supa Dave shall never die. The legend of Supa Dave shall never die. Light is out for Supa Dave, he's our guy. He's our guy. Cause MILTOWN'S besties battle cry.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is me. Say it with me now, guys. I am your one and only long-lost digital homie, and they call me Supa Dave. And this is MILTOWN'S Best. Everybody in the chat, there's 41 of you here already? Wow. You know, usually I'm a morning streamer, but I made concessions today for our special guests. We have two of them today. We have journalist Mike Volpe on, and he has been making waves in our small community, and the fan base of a huge YouTuber has been shook to the core by this journalist and his partner. But not only this journalist and his partner, there is Esquire, a lawyer that has been all over this case that I have been covering, and his name is Bruce Matzkin, Esquire. And today we have both of these gentlemen, and I would like to take the time right now to introduce you to Mike. Mike, are you still muted, or can you hear me as of right now?
I'm unmuted and I can hear you perfectly.
Awesome. And we have Mike, and we also have Bruce. Bruce, how's it going?
Hey, Supa Dave, good to see you.
I am so excited for this interview, guys. It has been a long time coming. First and foremost, Mike, I have to... Is it okay if I call you Mike? Is that all right?
That's fine.
I have to apologize to you because we were going to do this interview a long, long time ago. And, you know, scheduling, I am just a shitty communicator. I apologize to you from the bottom of my heart. But apparently you were getting text messages the day of our interview trying to get you to cancel the interview. And I believe that was actually from your former friend, Megan Fox, who is now covering this story. And she said, again, you are showing me that you have no regard for me at all. These people are harassers, doxers, defamers. They have been doing these things to me for months, and if you give them any legitimacy, that tells me we are not friends. So I have to ask you, what's up with this, Mike?
I've known Megan since 2014, so that was 10 years into our relationship. So Bruce contacted me sometime in the summer, and it was about the story we're going to talk about, Mac Daddy. But we did talk about this What the Hell story. And the first thing I told him is, let me do this article, and then we'll talk about What the Hells. And so I knew some about the story when I published my first article, and Megan sent me some nasty text messages. Bruce is my enemy, basically. And we went back and forth, and it wasn't a big deal, but I could tell we were like on a collision course here. I've known Megan a long time. She was a great journalist. She dug deep. She broke a lot of big stories. The first time I met her was 2014 when she busted a local South Side Chicago library that was allowing porn in an area where kids were congregating, and they were. And I think
I've heard about that story.
Either quit. They definitely changed the policy. So she's done a lot of different work, but this has given her a bigger platform, I think, and probably more money, though I haven't seen her bank account. And the way she treats it is a lot different than the way she's treated anything and everything else. And she considers you her enemy because you cover the story in a different way than she does. I think if both she and I were covering illegal immigration and she was covering it one way and I was covering it another way, I don't think she'd care. I don't think she'd care if it was healthcare, if it was taxes. It was a million different things. But with this story, if you are covering it differently than her, you are her enemy. And so the text message you read was sent to me a few hours before we were scheduled to go on in December. December 5th, I think, is when the text message was sent. And yeah, she basically said either cancel this interview or we're not friends anymore. And it was extremely off-putting. And that text message is one of the reasons why I decided to cover the story. And I told, like, in 2021, I hooked up with a woman who I'd written about. We lived together. It's been mischaracterized that I impregnated a witness. She was never a witness. She was the subject of some stories before I covered her and afterwards, and I got her pregnant. I meant to get her pregnant. We have a son now. But and I didn't tell her. I told her after it blew up, and she was very kind. And she now acts like it's a big deal. She doesn't actually think it's a big deal. And that was one of the reasons why I didn't want to cover the story, because I gave her deference. Because at a time when I was in need, she gave me kindness. But she treats this a lot like a cult. I don't think they're in the Hales cult. I think it's more like a Hales echo chamber. But if you are outside of her way of thinking, you are the enemy. This is the way that Scientology works. It's the way almost all cults work. So, yeah, that text message is the end of our relationship. That was December 5th, 2024.
I was completely shocked because anybody who is in my chat right now knows that I stand up against harassing. I am so anti-doxing that I was making a documentary about doxers. I just found that fascinating. Haven't had one conversation with the lady, and I just couldn't believe it that she's calling me her enemy. And all I've ever did is when she did a 2-hour stream speculating about one of my leaked DMs, I said, you could have came to me and got my story about it. You know, you could have still speculated, but you would have at least, as a journalist, said, here is his side of what this was. And she wasn't interested. And so what I'm basically here to do is talk about you as a journalist, talk about this macaroni and cheese cover up that involves Bruce, and it goes all the way back to 2011, Bruce, right? Am I correct that this cover up started in 2011?
Actually, 2013, really, 2013.
Okay, but the actual Mac Daddies was actually registered as an LLC in 2011, I thought, according to.
Oh, that may be so. Right.
Right.
But for a couple of years, it operated until this all began.
The restaurant started, I think, in 2011. The legal drama started in 2013. There's two important things, in my opinion, about the story. First, the judge primarily involved, her name is Carrie Dooley. At the time, she was a state judge. She's now a federal judge. That's a very powerful judge. She's a federal judge in Connecticut. And so she's important. So her corruption, even if it goes back a decade, is important. Second of all, this shows the amount of power judges have. And this was, I would say, legal theft of a business from one party to another, a judge legally stealing a business and handing it from one person to another. And it's a breathtaking display of power. And people should consider, is this the amount of power we should allow judges to have? Is there a way to reduce the power of judges? And so those are in my opinion, the important themes of the story.
Now, before we get involved in everything, I got to ask you, Mike, what made you get into journalism? Is this like a childhood thing? You wanted to be a journalist as a kid or anything like that? Or what got you involved in all that?
I did. And then I saw the movie Wall Street, and then I wanted to be a stockbroker. And I was at this point in mortgages, and mortgages were very hot until 2007. 2007 was still all right. The subprime mortgages were destroyed, but I had a business that was spread out enough, so I was doing more prime in 07. 08, the subprime mortgages just got destroyed. The way I got into journalism was I was blogging on the side, not to be paid, but I just had more free time because there's a lot less loans. And I did a story about Emory University, and the reason I did it was my brother was an undergrad at Emory at the time. That's why it interested me. And it involved a whistleblower named Kevin Koritsky, and he was blowing the whistle on major corruption at their medical school, which is one of the top medical schools in the country. And in essence, what I did was I read a story, I rearranged it on my blog, and then I published it. But Kevin found it, and Kevin reached out to me, and we talked for probably 2 hours, and he gave me a lot, and then I had to figure it out. And I thought this was something I could do, and I started doing the Emory story. I can't remember the guy's name, but there was the general counsel, that's the head lawyer for Emory University, quit as a result of my work there. But that was like my entree. About a year, actually, I probably within like 3 or 4 months, people were contacting me to put paid ads on my blog. So I was making like a few thousand right off the bat, not right off the bat, but within a few months, I was making some money, not a lot. So I was still doing mortgages. By 2010 was when I started doing it full time. But from Kevin, I met other whistleblowers, mostly medical whistleblowers. From them, I met other kinds of whistleblowers. And generally, my stories are whistleblowers or someone of that nature comes to me.
And you have an awesome Substack. I have been thoroughly enjoying your stories that you have been writing on there. It says you got over 2.5 thousand followers on your Substack. The link will be in the description of this video, and also I hope the mods can post a link to Michael Volpe's actual Substack. Now, what got you, just doing this, and are you finding it fruitful at all?
Doing this meaning what?
Actually writing your own Substack, because that is something you control yourself, right? Like publishing
Right.
your own articles.
Right. So in 2019 was my best year professionally. Things were rocking. 2020 was my worst year. And I don't know if it was the COVID or not. But what was happening was every story that I got approved by, and I was working with several different websites and media and newspapers, almost, not every, but a lot of them were getting approved. I'd write them and they'd be denied after I wrote it. I wrote this amazing story about this. I call her a serial killer at a VA hospital in Louisiana, because what she was doing was, if you were like too old or too sick, she would just stop treating you and let you die. And it got approved. I wrote it, and the editor-in-chief of the website took it to their lawyers, and the lawyers are like, "No way, we can't publish that. We're going to get sued." And that one got denied. I wrote a really in-depth story about an Orthodox Jewish woman who got screwed in a divorce. That got denied. There was a bunch of them, and I didn't know exactly where to go towards the end of 2020. Came up with like this gimmick of doing stories through like crowdfunding, which worked pretty well for a while. And then I found like more traditional, like the ways I'd made money before. I sort of put it to the side, and then I got this video from St. Louis County that if you go on YouTube, it's St. Louis Family Court Corruption. And that's how I started working with Megan hand in hand. And I had heard about Substack. I'm not as much a fan now, but at the time I was a pretty big fan of Glenn Greenwald. He had started there, Matt Taibbi. And so I was publishing through my blog, and Substack just made more sense. And one of the things that I had, because there's paid subscribers and free subscribers, I had like 10 articles that were collecting dust. And I decided, well, I could just publish most of those behind the paywall. That's a good way to get started. And that article about the VA doctrine in Louisiana is behind the paywall. But the Substack seemed to make sense as far as what I was trying to do. I was sick of having an editor or a lawyer behind the scenes tell me my story is just too hot. It's going to get us sued. We're not going to do it.
That is absolutely fascinating. And then what drew you to this macaroni and cheese story? Was that how did you meet Bruce? And
Bruce, I think, was already a subscriber, but he sent me an email. Do you know what drew me to it is I do a lot of family court. I do a lot of court, but primarily out of that is family court. And this was a story that wasn't family court. The other thing is I know Dooley. I cover a guy named Paul Boyne. He's not in jail anymore, though. He's still awaiting trial, and for writing mean things on his blog. That's the only way I could describe it. And he would write his own appeals to the federal court, and it was Dooley who heard every appeal and denied every single one of them. So I knew Dooley from Paul, and I am trying not to be pigeonholed that the only thing I do is family court, and this is like a civil case. So I was like, perfect, something
You're awesome.
totally different. I wouldn't even mind
Booyah,
being
Supa
pigeonholed
Dave.
by court as long as it's a wide array of court. So those two things drew me to it, and the story itself is pretty interesting. And then when you combine it with what the bar is doing to Bruce, I've done a lot on the bar going after whistleblower lawyers. I don't know if the bar's going after Bruce because he's a whistleblower. Somebody has a hard on for like a meaningless, very minor problem that should have been taken care of a long time ago. And so in the Mac Daddy story, the opposite attorneys who were from a big law firm that's no longer alive, LeClaire Lyon, were allowed to engage in a blatant conflict of interest that should have been flagged, not just by Dooley, but by the bar. And that is allowed to go on. In the meantime, Bruce doesn't explain some billing matter to the satisfaction of the bar. And 2.5 years later, however long, they're still going after him. So that's what drew me to it. If you get me a story that's outside of family court, I'm actually drawn to it.
Now, Bruce, are you there? Are you still with us, Bruce? I got to ask Bruce. Bruce, what made you reach out to Michael about this macaroni and cheese case?
The same thing when I first reached out to Larry Foreman. I was trying to find someone to report on it, and I would just come across randomly, some journalist or a Substack, that I'd seen, and if at that moment I said, oh boy, I think I'll just send, take a shot, send off some information and a pitch, sort of, I honestly can't say I have a specific memory of it, but I believe he responded, expressing interest to hear, some more, and then it went from there. But the real connection, I think, that caught him was the Dooley angle, because he's already covering this other Paul Boyne story involving Dooley, and also the Megan Fox. Something now I remember, because I saw, I think I'd seen Mike's Substacks, but I saw him and Megan Fox on a stream together. Mike, if I'm not mistaken, that was recent. A live appearance.
Right. Let me talk about that. So I interviewed Megan. At the time, she had done a lot on this woman, Karen Reed, out of Massachusetts. This guy who was on The Bachelor, this woman had scammed him and screwed him. And then she was just starting the What the Hills. And so I interviewed her with Rick Lutman in September.
You're
and the reason
awesome.
That's important is she and her crew are trying to say that because of this thing in 2022 that she does not care about, that she lost respect for me. Now, you can all go watch that interview in September. I don't know when she lost respect for me, but it's sometime between that interview and now. But yeah, we talked about Hales, but she had just started at that point, and she just mentioned this biased judge that they had to get off the case. So she didn't have that much on it, but she did mention What the Hills
right
in the interview, and that's the first time I'd heard of it. I didn't know. I'm on YouTube. I'd never heard of Jeremy Hales until now.
But this is what reminds me of how I got in touch with Mike, because I realized now that she's getting her hooks in, not her hooks in it, but the point is whatever was mentioned, it was her, her propaganda basically. And I'm like, wow, here's another guy who probably doesn't know the first thing about it except that what she's telling him, and now I can have an impetus to reach out to him, and that's what started it.
I would almost always do a story like What the Hills, and the only reason I didn't for a long time was because of the relationship I had with Megan, and because what happened in 2022, that at a moment when I was pretty down, and she could have kicked me when I was down, and she had a right to, because I probably should have told her that I was having an affair, having a relationship with somebody I was covering, and I didn't, and she took it kindly. But as I said, when she sent me that text message, she was ending the relationship because I was going on a YouTube channel to talk about a completely separate story. And by the way, she doesn't want to cover the Mac Daddy story. She'll make fun of it, but she doesn't want to cover it because it doesn't make Bruce look bad. She can't figure out a way to say, Bruce Matzkin is such an idiot. Look at what happened in the Mac Daddy story. So she won't even cover it. Now, that's not my problem. But
you got to understand, they're under the thumb of Jeremy Hales. I mean, if they do something he doesn't like, then they fall out of his grace and the privilege of propagating his content and making the money they're making.
Right. Yeah. It totally looks like that. And as I've said when I was on Two Leaves in a Pod, as I'll say till the day I die, this is very different from the Megan that I know, the journalist that I've known since 2014. She's never done this. I'd say she clout chases. I don't think, that sounds like a dirty word, but, she covered Depp Heard because there was a big trial. And if you can, get where people count on your coverage, that's a way to clout chase. I don't think that's wrong. Karen Reed, for the same reason. A lot of, big crime stories she covered, because if you can, squeeze and become a leader in that story, you get a lot of clout. There's nothing wrong with that, but this is not that. When she covered the Depp Heard trial, she was honest about it. She didn't, she wasn't carrying anybody's water. Karen Reed, same thing. She wasn't carrying anybody's water. This is different. She's carrying this guy's water, and there's no question she is.
Right.
I completely agree. And, when I heard about this macaroni and cheese cover up, I was
Dave, you got any other questions? Can we start on the Mac Daddy story?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's dive right in. I was
we
just
lose him?
ready.
I don't know, but you sound better now. You were garbled, but now you sound a lot better. Supa Dave?
Sorry about that. I apologize. I am I know that we're having some audio issues. I apologize for that. It seems
I hear it great, so I don't know where the audio issues are. They're not on my end.
I heard you. It just wasn't as crystal clear as it could be, but I heard everything he said.
Okay.
All right. But yeah, well, let's definitely dive in to this macaroni and cheese cover-up, as we call it. Now, I gotta ask, basically, can you give us a TLDR, in your opinion, on what this is all about, Michael?
Yes. Two guys get into business together, Robert Dunn and Joseph Ball. Dunn started this macaroni and cheese, Mac Daddy, fast food place. He wanted to expand. He didn't have the money to expand. Ball did. They reached an agreement where Ball would get half the business, and he would finance and bring two new locations to fruition. They actually had the two locations set up. The business relationship quickly disintegrated, and then Ball found out, not that anyone was hiding, that Dunn was taking money from the register. And he found out because every time Dunn took money from the register, he would tell the bookkeeper to put it in the books. And he was taking money from the register because he was working a lot of hours. So maybe you think that's wrong, maybe you think that's right. That's actually of little consequence. So Ball, even though he hasn't actually done anything yet, sues Dunn for all of the money that he took out of the register. And then as that lawsuit progresses, Dunn finds out that Ball's daughter has started a company and is planning on opening two locations for a competitor, Mac and Out, in the exact locations where he planned to make Mac Daddy two locations. So he plans on suing, and the same lawyers represent dad and daughter from LeClaire Ryan, Conway, and AC. And Bruce doesn't come on immediately, but Bruce comes on and sees that. And I remember when I interviewed Bruce, I'm just like, this looks like a blatant conflict of interest, but I'm a layman. Is it as blatant as it looks? And yes, they cannot, in good conscience, represent each other. And what happened is the judge, the now federal judge, would not rule on it and allowed these two to represent the two competitors in competing lawsuits, and then told Bruce and his client to just go ahead and file a bar complaint, which they did, which was summarily dismissed without mentioning the substance of the bar complaint, which is that there's a conflict of interest here. In the meantime, Ball finds out that Dunn has a judgment. He buys the judgment, and then I'm going to fast forward through a lot of legal wranglings, goes and sells the judgment to himself and says that the judgment is worth exactly Robert Dunn's half the business. And there is actually a law called the LLC Act, which disallows this. And what Dooley does is she twists herself into knots because she didn't like Dunn or who knows what. She twists herself into knots to write an order which justifies this despite the law. Vol, without putting one dime in, now owns 100% of Mac Daddy. Dunn, who had built the company from scratch, owes zero. And that is the story in a nutshell.
Wow. Now, Bruce, you were telling me that, you know, when you got the call from Dunn, that he basically gave Vol 50% of the company for nothing. Is that correct? That he basically had no skin in the game and got ended up with the whole business for nothing. You know, is that really essentially how it kind of went down, that he talked Dunn into all this?
Exactly. Well, you know, what Dunn didn't have counsel, or if he did, it was very bad counsel. That when he entered into the agreement, remember, he'd already built up the company, right, for a couple of years, including the Facebook network of, you know, fans, you know, like thousands of fans, and created the concept and everything, right? So when he decided it was ripe to expand, he gave 50% on paper to Vol, for Vol to prospectively, meaning he gave it in advance, but Vol wouldn't fulfill his contract in consideration for that 50% ownership until he opened 2 locations in Milford, Connecticut, and Darien, Connecticut. And so instead of, you know, making the deal, okay, you know, you become gradual owner or whatever, you know, benchmarks. The point is, he was on paper 50% owner right off the bat. So then they had the falling out, and over Dunn paying himself for working, you know, full time, blood, sweat, and tears. And so Vol, unbeknownst at the time, hatched this scheme with these 2 lawyers from LeClaire Ryan. And what they did is they bring a lawsuit in the name of Mac Daddies because it's called derivative. He's a 50% owner, and he's not suing for anything that belongs to him. He's suing for the money that belongs to Mac Daddies, he's claiming. So he has to hire lawyers, and he has the right to do so as a 50% owner, to bring a claim on behalf of Mac Daddies. And so they enter an appearance on a form called an appearance, and it's to the world announcing, we represent Mac Daddies, and we are suing Robert Dunn on behalf of Mac Daddies through Robert Vol. So
You're awesome.
That was, it turns out, a cover
Donating to Dave because I'm a
you know,
fool.
for the going
Smiley
on
face.
secretly formation of Mac and Out with Vol's daughter, planning to use the very 2 locations that he had been given 50% ownership of Mac Daddies to open Mac Daddies in those locations. So this gets discovered around the spring of 2013. It causes a settlement to fall apart because Dunn found out about it by contacting vendors that, oh, did you know that Vol is also contacting us to open up a Mac and Out? And then, you know, we figure we got him red-handed, and but little did we know that they would then appear when Dunn brought a lawsuit for Mac. Again, remember, Vol brought the lawsuit of Mac Daddy's name. Well, now Dunn brings a lawsuit of Mac Daddy's name because he has 50% standing.
You're awesome.
And that claim is that Vol
Yes,
and Mac and Out are stealing its
Smiley
location.
face. Smiley
And
face.
Who
Smiley
could imagine
face.
that the same 2 lawyers would appear for Mac Daddies against, I'm sorry, for Mac and Out against Mac Daddies. They already had an appearance from Mac Daddies against Dunn. Now they're appearing for Mac and Out to defend against Mac Daddies. So now they have an appearance for 2 opposing parties in directly related litigation at the same time. And we're like, okay, when is the judge going to, you know, do something about this? The answer was never.
Was Judge Dooley on this case at this point?
Exactly. And that's all in this chronology. And you know, there you have a link, a document which has the whole chronology, which you're showing. And at the very top of that is a link to the Google Drive, which has all of
Yes.
the documents that are excerpted in there. And so,
And it's
yeah,
in the
so the first
description.
thing we do, yeah, and you can go date by date. I mean, if you scroll through it, I don't have it in front of me, but the, first notice was right before we sought an injunction. So I'm sorry, I'm looking at you and you're talking, but it's a few seconds off. So we brought an injunction. We said, look, Mac Daddy's seeks an injunction that says Mac and Out can't steal its locations. And to our surprise, Conway and AC appear for Mac and Out the day before that injunction hearing. Now, we have a little discussion about it, but Dooley lets it go forward for several days, an evidentiary proceeding with them representing Mac and Out against Mac Daddy's, while at the same time having an appearance for Mac Daddy's. And it turns out she ends up denying the injunction on ridiculous reasoning, allowing them to take the location. So that's a fait accompli. And then she just day after day, proceeding after proceeding, refuses to rule on any disqualification or conflict issue. Keeps saying, I don't have time. I'll get to it later. And then after months, she says, oh, you know what? This isn't the appropriate forum to raise these issues. If you believe that they're violating the rules of conduct, by having a conflict, you should raise it with the disciplinary authorities. And we're like, okay. So Dunn files a grievance with the disciplinary authorities, the statewide grievance committee of Connecticut. I'm going to start my cam here, and documents this conflict with the appearances of Mac Daddy's and Mac and Out against Mac Daddy's. I mean, it's just black and white. There's no two ways about it. And instead of trying to rationalize it, what happens is the statewide grievance committee, a lawyer that has to do what's called a probable cause decision, writes a decision dismissing the grievance for a lack of probable cause of any violation of rules of conduct, without mentioning Mac and Out or acknowledging the conflict. Just completely whitewashed it. And the question, the glaring red flag is, how could two lawyers engage in the conflict? And how can a judge say, oh, you know what, just go tell the disciplinary authority, knowing what had occurred and what this judge allowed to have occurred, and risk what could be, an outcome that would hold them accountable? To me, that suggests that it was all in the bag.
Right.
Now, Mike, you said you've had history with this Judge Dooley. What are your impressions of this judge?
Well, a lot more in this case, but in Paul Boyne's case, there's a blatant violation of his First Amendment right. They're charging him with cyber stalking. It gets very complicated. She has precedent not to get involved. There is case law that's because generally a federal judge should not intercede in a state matter. You let the state case resolve itself, except in extraordinary circumstances. I would say Paul's is an extraordinary circumstance, but in essence, what I'd say is in Paul Boyne's case, she shows a lack of courage. She has the case law to give a perfectly good legal reasoning and cite case law why she shouldn't get involved. But if she had any courage, she would say, no, this is a blatant violation of his First Amendment, and I will intercede. But she doesn't want to do that. So that's my history. I know she was a divorce judge. I haven't gotten. I think people have had her that I'm in contact with. I could probably do a bigger dossier if I ever had the time to it. I wouldn't say her behavior is outrageous in Paul Boyne's case, but it's certainly not heroic. And the bigger problem is with the state judges who allow it to go on. But she's not standing up for the First Amendment. He was writing mean blog posts. He was saying things like, this judge gave this child to a child molester. This is the time when the Second Amendment needs to happen, or this kind of behavior is worthy of a 50 cal. And they're saying that this is a threat. None of it is actually threatening. No one believes that Paul was threatening any judges. Everyone can see it's satire. They don't like him. He exposes Connecticut judges. He had a Connecticut divorce many years ago. That's why they're going after him. He is an anti-Semite.
Well, he's a neo-Nazi, but you know.
Right. But that's legal. You can
Right.
criticize him for that. That's not illegal. I don't know about a neo-Nazi, but definitely an anti-Semite. And so that makes him unsympathetic. But
Right.
it doesn't mean you get to charge him with a completely bogus.
No, true.
And there's also case law that allows her to intercede. Because as I said, what the case law says is in extraordinary circumstances. And she could look at the case and say there's extraordinary circumstances here. There's an email chain back and forth, and in the email chain, written, not typed out, it says, "Speak to Katz only," and they're referring to a woman named Joette Katz, who was the head of DCF,
Right.
who's a former judge, who is a very powerful Jewish litigator, who has written about Paul's case, who has said that that this case is worthy of being prosecuted before he was. She could, and Paul has submitted that particular document as evidence. She could have said, we need to find out. I want to call Ms. Katz as a witness. I want to call everyone on the email stream to find out what they mean. Because let's hypothetically say that Joette Katz was directing this prosecution outside of, she's not a part of the government anymore. Look, I doubt she'd admit it if that's the case, but she could say there's evidence that there are extraordinary circumstances. She hasn't interceded. He's definitely not a likable guy. He insults me all the time. All right. He insults everyone. He's a very smart guy. I don't think he's actually an anti-Semite. I think what happened to him as a result of his divorce has made him very, very bitter, and he's taken out. And there's a lot of Jewish judges. He's creating a lot of like conspiracy theories about the way the courts work, but she isn't showing courage in that case.
Because the tie-in is to the macaroni and cheese with Dooley. Yeah, so it's another example of a case where she apparently, look, you can make your own characterization of it, whether she's abusing her power or not. But in our case, this was an abrogation of judicial duty to enforce the rules of conduct, and this wasn't spitting on the sidewalk misconduct. This is egregious, high-level misconduct and cover-up, you go ahead, Mike.
There's one other thing. I don't know if this is exactly directly related, but this is the sort of misconduct that a big firm like LaCroix Ryan can get away with. Mom and pop boutique firms can't get away with this. The bar will go after you if you're a boutique firm and you do something like this.
Yeah, okay,
100%
but that's not to listen. This is not something that even other big firms do or get away with. This is far beyond. What your point is well taken. Your point is that big firms, connected firms, they'll get a lot of breaks and a lot of bending over backwards to interpret something that could be one way or the other. This is way beyond anything like that. There is not another example of this. This is very one of a kind.
Very egregious. Now, so this case then moves forward, and this guy Ball finds out that Dunn has an old judgment for several tens of thousands. Goes and buys the judgment. And yes. Bruce, I'm not going to get the exact details of what happened.
Let me try to. So what happens is, look, they had already by now, they had engaged in the conflict. The judge had refused to take action. It had been reported to the grievance committee, and it was whitewashed into dismissal. All this occurred, and basically now it's what I call a game of charades. If that had already occurred, what kind of a shake did we expect to get at an eventual trial of the original lawsuit, which was the Mac Daddies against Dunn, through Vol when he was hiding Macking out. And so what does Vol do? Well, they hatch a plan to take over ownership of Mac Daddies altogether. And this was the plan. He finds an unrelated old judgment that some landlord had against Dunn. Dunn was, not the greatest guy either, but beside the point. And so he buys this judgment from this landlord, God knows for how much. and he schedules what's called a martial auction to execute. So the judgment amount was whatever it was. I don't know. Mike, you said it. You said it was the exact amount of the value, but that's not necessarily the case. It was just he could auction off Dunn's property to satisfy that judgment, and the plot was to auction off Dunn's 50% ownership of Mac Daddies as property. The problem is the law didn't allow that. When you're trying to execute against an LLC owner's ownership of an LLC, you can only go against their income stream, very specifically. So that means if you're an LLC 50% owner, and let's say, you get distributions of profits, you can attach that to satisfy a judgment. Nevertheless, they scheduled a sale, and when we found out about that, the plan was to try to stop it, and Dunn filed for bankruptcy, which creates an automatic stay. Well, they plotted while he's in the bankruptcy court for whenever his bankruptcy got dismissed, as it probably inevitably would, they would the next day reconvene this martial sale without any notice to anybody, and then just sell that ownership. So they did all this, and after the fact, we find out Vol has, according to a marshal, purchased 50% ownership of Mac Daddies that was owned by Dunn, and now himself owns 100%. He was the only bidder. He sold it to himself, I believe, for $50,000, just a made-up amount, and that 50,000 ended up being a tiny fraction of the judgment against Dunn. So all it would be a credit. He didn't even get any of that money. So he started this company, built it up, brought him in on a promise to open 2 locations, and created a situation. And the situation was that he secretly stole the locations for the competitor, his daughter's company, and then stole the entire company and market for macaroni and cheese restaurants that Dunn had created, who got nothing. And Dooley is the one who made it all happen.
and another interesting thing, if you read the order, Dooley makes Dunn into like this horrible human being, and
try to justify it.
Right. None of the things
he knows. The only thing most people will ever know about the case is that one decision she wrote.
Right. So, and doesn't mention any of these things, of course. So, Dunn is a bad guy. He's stealing. He's this. He's that. And one other thing. So, she does acknowledge, it's called the LLC Act. She acknowledges, she even quotes the act and explains how it works. What she did was she goes, but the LLC Act states that if there's an operating agreement, nothing in the LLC Act will override the operating agreement. And then she says, and the operating agreement does not specifically bar what is being done here. And since the operating agreement doesn't specifically bar it, I'm going to allow it to happen. Now think about, why would someone in an operating agreement specifically bar something that the law already bars? That portion is for an operating agreement where it would say, despite the LLC Act, we will allow in this operating agreement this kind of an arrangement. And then in that case, you would go with the operating agreement, not an operating agreement that doesn't even address something that the law addresses.
Yeah. Now she spent 16 pages of gymnastics, linguistic gymnastics. It makes my head explode every time I try to read it, to come to the conclusion that notwithstanding all of the precedent, all of the Supreme Court of Connecticut clearly stated law, the LLC Act, that somehow this trial level judge, without any legislation, without any appellate precedent, somehow came up with an exception so that in this case, the ownership interest, 50% of the LLC, could be awarded to the judgment creditor. And now, why would it just be limited to income? Well, because you can get exactly what you're owed. How can you actually value the value of a 50% ownership of a fledgling LLC? I mean, it's ridiculous. Right. And yet he became 100% owner and got the whole market and all the locations. And it was with the imprimatur of a judge. She actually applied what's called the Connecticut Unfair Trade Practices Act in this trial decision. In one paragraph, she just says, I find that CUTPA applies, and that enabled her to add about $300,000 in attorney fees against Dunn. And unfair trade practices protects either consumers or competitors. and yet she applied it in an intra-partnership situation without any analysis or further explanation.
Here's how ridiculous her order is. She specifies exactly how much Dunn stole in her words. And how does she know exactly how much he took? Because every time he took it, he went to the bookkeeper and said, "Here's how much I'm taking out."
Yeah, exactly.
This is some thief. He steals and then tells the bookkeeper exactly how much he stole. There was a way to deal with this in a way that made everybody happy, where you say, "Well, you took this much. Here's how much you owe," and come to an agreement.
Simple.
And the courts didn't want to do that. Ball didn't want to do that. And
because he had this plot going on.
Right. That's correct. And I think if this was an objective court, that's what would have happened, because this is not a difficult thing to unravel or to negotiate a deal on. Everyone knew exactly how much was taken, because Dunn, the master thief, every time he took, went to the bookkeeper and said, "Here's how much I'm taking."
Ironically,
and look, I talked to Dunn. He really dislikes this idea that he stole, and he has a point. If you're working 40 to 60 hours a week and you don't have another income, I mean, what do people expect? I don't know if he told Ball, on a human level, maybe he should have. They should have ironed out more differences before they got started and everyone knew what was happening. I don't know. Look, if he told them, "I'm taking from this thing," and the guy still went and sued, that's really terrible. But if this surprise Ball, that's a lesson for people, that if you're going to get into business with someone, make sure everybody knows everything. But it does not justify anything that Ball did.
Let me tell you what happened was, too, after this whole thing with the conflict and she allowed it, there had been a settlement reached until it was about to be reached, where it was just going to be a divorce. They each go on their way, and Vol would be let out of his financial obligation. He wouldn't be partner anymore. Breakup. Look, it didn't work out. But then Matt was discovered, and we thought we would be able to stop Macking out from stealing the locations, and we already told you what happened with that. So after the injunction, when Dooley wouldn't prevent them from stealing the locations, she said, and I strongly encourage, I think she used implore or exhort or whatever, the parties to revisit mediation. Now, we'd already reached an agreement and it fell apart because they were secretly stealing the locations. And now she says you should really reach an agreement where everybody can move on and get out of this litigation. So we did, again, with the same judge, Agati, have another mediation and reached another agreement. But then Vol said, "But you know what? No, I insist that to settle now, that Mac Daddy's brand must be retired and its Facebook social network shut down. That's the only way I will now agree to drop the lawsuit."
So he wanted to completely obliterate this brand. And go figure that your client didn't want to do it.
It's absolutely
right, and of course that didn't fly. That wasn't agreeable to us. Who knew what was going to happen then? And then they plotted to steal the brand, and that's when the brand, the plot to steal the Mac Daddy's brand and market was hatched. When we wouldn't just shut it down altogether, so they would have a no competitor in the macaroni and cheese market in Connecticut.
Wow. So Vol wins, Dunn is out, his whole life's work in essence. He's now owes all his lawyer fees. The judge in this case gets to skate. The lawyers get to skate. Meanwhile, Bruce Matzkin is stuck here trying to say, "Hey man, there's some wrong things going on here. You're trying to put a spotlight on all this. Talk to Michael. Michael's trying to put a spotlight on this. And somehow, you do a few streams here and there, and that leads you into this whole YouTuber case. And now,
Right.
Michael, you are in on this YouTuber case. You have a go get funding because there is a lot of stuff here with this whole situation in this YouTuber case.
I created the Go Get, and I use Go Get Funding because I tried it once and I really liked it, so I use it.
Yeah, they have great rates.
They're very user friendly, so I can figure everything out. It's basically crowdfunding for for the stories. But so as I said, soon after I started talking to Bruce, he started mentioning the story. And I remember like a few weeks in, I decided to check out one of Hale's videos, and he starts by saying, "I've won again. I win every time. I'm winning. I'm winning. I'm winning." And I called Bruce and I said, "What's he talking about?" And Bruce started explaining. And he was like, number one, he wasn't winning every single thing, but he was talking about these early motions. And I've covered enough trials to understand, but the misleading part isn't even whether he's winning or not. It's acting like the motion you're winning is so important that you need to go on video and tell everybody about the motion you just won. So I knew about it right away. It was fascinating, and the fascinating part of the fascinating part is I couldn't understand why everything was fascinating. And I guess if you didn't know who Jeremy Hales was, it seems like this kind of boring defamation suit and nothing else. But of course, he started calling CPS and all of these other things. But as I said, it took me a while to cover the story, and that ironically has everything to do with Megan, my former friend. So even though I didn't want to cover it because I was friends with Megan, ultimately it cost us our friendship, and here I am. And it's the only connection is that Bruce is involved in both of them, and that there's a court case involved. I'll tell you what clinched it for me in terms of this being a scam from Hale's part. Bruce sent me an email and said something like, I just deposed Hales, he's crazy. And then he told me that this deposition, it was wild. And he built it up. And him building it up did not do it justice. What Hales did in that deposition is, number one, he turned a mockery of the deposition. I've been
Very
deposed.
wrong.
Right. I've been deposed. I've watched depositions. It's serious. You should treat it seriously. That's one. You treat it like a joke. He's calling him dudes, big nose. That's wrong. But the main thing was Bruce was asking what I call meritorious question, a lot of them. And every time the response, and it's two legal terms, non-responsive and argumentative. And there's a reason why courts don't allow a non-responsive argumentative answer. And you want to know the reason, go read this deposition, because he didn't have any, Bruce would say, well, did you lose any contracts? Well, he didn't lose any contracts. Well, if he didn't lose any contracts, then that's a central part of his case. It was like something about, I think Michelle said something like, all Hales does is talk about his big cock, or something like that. And Bruce said, well, how is that defamatory? Well, it's not, okay? That's the answer. The reason, and I don't remember if he was non-responsive or argumentative in that answer, but the reason he was one of those two things is because the answer, if you're being honest, is it's not. And he doesn't want to say it's not because that's a bad answer. So he gives these long, drawn-out answers. But I remember Bruce asked him something about being dishonest. Let's talk about dishonest. Your clients did this, and that's an example of argumentative. And I didn't even read the whole thing. I got through 70 pages. And I was like, this is frivolous. This guy, there's nothing meritorious about this lawsuit. This entire thing is totally frivolous. He's making a mockery of the court. And then Bruce's other contentions started to make sense. That really what he's doing is trying to create YouTube content. And all of these other things made sense. But it was that deposition is what showed me in substance that case. And if you guys can find, and I think I put it as a script online. I believe that at some point law schools will teach it as an example of what not to do in depositions. That's how bad it was. And I think he will feel hurt as a result of that deposition at some point, because the way he acted was way, way, way over the line. But that's
what do you have to say about his lawyer's action or inaction in the deposition?
Right. Look,
Good question.
When I was deposed, I didn't have a lawyer, so I had to deal with like 6 hours of questioning, which was difficult after about 4 hours. But yeah, no, his lawyer should have. Well, look, his lawyer, if he was trying to win the case, should have gotten him into line and told him that you can't behave this way. It's not going to help our case. Obviously, neither client or lawyer are that worried about the case because this deposition is not going to help them. And look, so what happens? Bruce files a motion. The judge blamed everyone, but the judge then ordered a deposition in front of him. So now the judge hears Hale's answers. Again, if you are trying to win the case, none of that is something you want to do. My deposition never saw the light of day. None of the things that happened there ended up having any effect on the case at all, which is, as the party being deposed, that's like the best outcome you can have. So if you're, a deposition is simple, but it's not easy. The simple part is the lawyer asks you questions and you have to answer them. The hard part is 6 hours of answering questions is very, very difficult. But, but this guy, Bruce will ask a question, he'll insult him. Bruce will ask a question, he'll answer the question he wants to ask, not the question Bruce asked. Bruce will ask a question, he'll argue with him. That's not how you behave in a deposition. That's what clinched it. I'm like, this is a story. This guy is making a mockery of the process. And look, I've been sued frivolously. Maybe this is one reason why Megan doesn't think it's a big deal, because she's never faced a frivolous lawsuit. It sucks. I was sued twice by the same guy over a 7-year period. There was a year and a half that I wasn't being sued by this guy.
That's crazy.
So I know what it's like to be frivolously sued. And it's not cool to file frivolous lawsuits, and especially not cool to file frivolous lawsuits because you want to create YouTube content. So that, look,
yeah.
to me,
Well, we've come up with a word for this that we think is going to catch. Pull them up. Yeah. Protraction of litigation and multiplication of proceedings. And that describes exactly what Hales and Shockett are doing. It's not to win a case or to prove claims. They know that they're bullshit claims. It's to create proceedings. It's to create fresh, ongoing legal developments, litigation related, which is always compelling content. Even motions for extension of time. By the way, just dropped on the docket is their response to our motion for extension of time to disclose a rebuttal expert, handwriting expert, and somehow he's come up with 14 pages of reasons why we shouldn't have time to disclose our handwriting expert. I haven't read it yet. So that's the big news, big scoop. Everybody can download it off Facebook.
And look, Megan and Tug and Shizzy, whatever his name is, I'm just going to call him Shizzy. They're all going to be out. They'll all be out in the next few days reading this thing breathlessly. And this is what I mean. Like, this motion, this is tactical. It's on the edges. This is not what's going to decide the case. They're going to treat it like it's a really big deal. And by the way, I don't remember how many days it's been. There has been a big order. The order came down. There were six counts. 2 are gone. 2 more are hanging by a thread. Then Bruce got a separate order. And the other 2, the judge is indicating, while he's denied it for now, he is still open to the idea of dismissing the last 2. So 2 are gone for sure. 2 are almost certainly gone. What Hales did was he sued for and let's talk about this because this is a fascinating part. So he sued for tortious interference, and tortious interference is when you are actually like directly messing with somebody's business. Like if I call your competitor or your suppliers and try to get the suppliers to cut you off, that's tortious interference. It's not like going on Yelp and saying Bruce sucks as a lawyer. That's not tortious interference. If Bruce is representing you, Dave, and I call you, Dave, and I'm like, Bruce sucks. He's terrible. You should drop him. And I don't think if it was just one client, but if I did it to like 30 clients, that would be tortious interference. So he sued for tortious interference. It's allowed to move forward. What the judge said is, at a later date, you, Jeremy Hales, are going to have to present an actual business partner or customer or subscriber who as a result of the direct action, meaning that Michelle or John reached out to them directly, cut off business contact. Not Michelle and John went on Facebook and said, you should drop Jeremy Hales. That's not tortious interference. Now, let's talk about the 2 claims that went away. So he sued under RICO, which was patently ridiculous.
The extortion you're talking about,
Yeah.
right?
Right, but under RICO. So in effect, Jeremy Hales was comparing Michelle Preston and John Cook to John Gotti, because that's what John Gotti. Now, in a criminal way, it's slightly different, but basically they were all sued or prosecuted under RICO. Michael Franzese, one of my favorite YouTube channels, he was back when he was a gangster. Gangsters are prosecuted under RICO. Like, the reason they used extortion, RICO, which is the Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organizations Act, what you have to do is you have to prove that a criminal enterprise exists, that the defendants are a part of it, and they've committed two predicate acts, two crimes in furtherance of the criminal enterprise. So in John Gotti's case, every murder that he approved is a crime in furtherance of the criminal enterprise, among many other crimes. So what they were saying is that John and Michelle are this criminal enterprise that engage in extortion. Extortion is a predicate act, but so what the problem was that Shockett and Hales did not, in their own complaint, because at this point in the case, when the judge looks at a motion to dismiss, the judge has to accept all plaintiff's allegations as fact, and then even in order to dismiss, you have to, even assuming all those facts, they still wouldn't get to a guilty or a, whatever the term is in civil court. So he didn't meet the elements of extortion because it would be, I think at one point Cook said something like, I have photos of Hale's fiance giving me a blowjob. Right, that's what he said. That's not extortion. What would be extortion is, and if Hales gives me $5,000 a month, I'm going to make sure that I don't leak that. That's extortion. So the problem, what Cook did is trash talking. Trash talking is not extortion. So this guy shot. The funny part is, if you read that portion of the order, it's like the judge, the magistrate, he's teaching law school. He's like, now let me explain how extortion works. You have these things.
And he gave examples.
Right. Now see in your case, see how you don't have all the elements. You see how you got it wrong. And that's basically what the magistrate did. Look, that's embarrassing. Shockett should be embarrassed. Okay, he is a lawyer who sued for extortion without understanding how extortion works. It's actually okay for a lawyer not to know how extortion works. A divorce lawyer doesn't necessarily have to know it. A contract lawyer wouldn't necessarily have to know it.
He knows how extortion works, Mike. He knows how extortion works. It's contrived for Palomop.
Right, but if you're going to file a lawsuit and you're going to allege extortion, you should know the elements of extortion, and he doesn't. Look, that dismissal is an embarrassment. That should never happen. Keep in mind, this is
Mike, hold on though. I'm sorry, I got to interrupt. He knows the elements of extortion. He knows.
Sure.
Randall Shockett knew that they did not allege the elements of extortion. Mm-hmm. Just like they know they're not serving subpoenas properly. Emotion, it's content. It's a response to emotion. It's a hearing on emotion. It's content about it. He knows the elements. It's purposeful.
Then it's even worse. Then this guy is acting in an unethical way on behalf of this
guy.
Right, and he should not be doing that at all. And by the way, Megan and Tug and Shizzy, do they ever criticize Shockett for any of this behavior?
No.
They're all out there only criticizing Bruce. Has any one of them mentioned that you got this thing dismissed because you didn't meet the elements of extortion?
Are you kidding me? He's the best lawyer in the world, according to them. Larry Foreman, who's trying to be a reputable lawyer and YouTuber, is using this guy as his lawyer as well. Does he realize that he got kicked out of the dental profession and rejected from the Arkansas bar, upheld by the Arkansas Supreme Court? I wouldn't hire a lawyer like that.
This is embarrassing for Shockett. He sued for extortion and didn't meet the elements. It's one thing if you make allegations and you can't prove them in a trial. That happens to even the best of lawyers. But here, he made allegations that didn't meet the elements of the crime. it shouldn't get you kicked out, but it's really bad that happened. And look, even on the tortious interference, it was such a low bar that the judge allowed it to move forward. But he really, thus far, has not actually met the elements of tortious interference because Hales has not presented an example of a specific like business partner or subscriber who Cook and Preston have tortiously interfered with. And as the judge stated, tortious interference is not a blanket statement to a lot of people like online.
Yeah.
It's not tortious interference to say you all should unsubscribe to Hale's YouTube channel. That's not tortious interference. It's actually reaching out to a specific person and trying to sever a business partnership or whatever the case may be. And so really, even with those two, again, Shockett has not met the elements of, it's not called a crime, but of the offense. So on 4 of the 6 counts, he has not met the elements of the offense based on his own allegations. That is awful.
But there's been hours and hours of content generated and monetized off of all of this amongst many channels.
Right.
You know,
there have, but other people will consider hiring him. You should consider that if you're hiring him. He doesn't see. Look, he either knows the elements and is going along, which makes him very unethical, or he doesn't know the elements, which makes him very stupid. So one or the other.
Let me make this very clear. This is a 2-party conspiracy to abuse and exploit litigation to fulfill the content generation on YouTube. That's what this is. He knows the elements. He knows that you need to affect a specific contract or customer and that they haven't done that. Do you want to know the only contract he's identified is Whatnot? Now, that didn't exist at the time the lawsuit was filed. That came months and months later, and they refused to turn over the contract. The only contract that they've said in discovery has been interfered with by my clients. And sitting in front of the judge on December 19th, I asked him, well, what have you done to determine if my clients have interfered? Have you contacted Whatnot? He goes, no, but I plan to. So it's admission after admission that this is contrived, frivolous nonsense, and the lawyer knows it. He knows it because that's the key component. That's one half of the whole plot is the litigation, for litigation's sake, Polymop. And of course, the stalking and the real world stalking, and then the YouTube videos is the other part.
Right.
You know,
and look, we're a litigious society. You really should look harshly at people who misuse the legal system to file frivolous lawsuits. You know, most people don't get sued. I have been. It's very unpleasant. It's not cool to sue someone just for the sake of
listen. And the usual motives for frivolous lawsuit are just like because you're just mad at somebody or you're whatever, out for revenge or something petty. This is again, you know, like we were talking about the conflict with these 2 lawyers in the macaroni cheesecake, as if that's like a run of the mill, you know, thing that big lawyers get away with. No. It's exponentially way worse. This is the absolute. I guarantee you, there's not another lawyer that has seen the abuse and exploitation of litigation so openly and glaringly. For the end in and of itself of to create the proceedings for you ever.
And if he gets away with it, other content creators will see this and they may copy him. And you're going to see other lawsuits done strictly to create content. And is that what you want? Is that you want Twitch?
That's why it's such an important case.
Right. You want Twitch and YouTube,
among other reasons,
and all of these other streaming providers to be used as a platform for some guy who's got 50,000 followers, but he filed this frivolous lawsuit and he's going to create all this content and build himself up to 500,000 and make tons of money. And one after the other, they're going to do it because even if the lawsuit gets dismissed, the amount of money I'll make from content is well worth it.
Exactly. They're only worried about now, and they'll deal with whatever comes because they know it's always more content, whatever comes, and you know they'll throw up whatever. They'll take every step they can to create.
Look, when this gets dismissed, they'll go on a rampage for about 5 months about what a corrupt and idiot judge the magistrate is, and we're appealing. And once we get this to appeals court, you're going to see, and his followers will believe it.
It's crazy
Right.
that you can
Well,
already see that
this
far
judge
down.
is actually, I think this order is a good order because he, he didn't want to dismiss defamation on summary judgment and give them the chance to say, well, we got cut off at the knees during discovery. He's going to let the discovery period, conclude, which is into April. And then he very pointedly, in bold letters, in bold-faced type, said without prejudice to refile a renewed summary judgment motion, meaning after, and he said after the close of discovery. Somehow Shizzy interpreted that to mean that already discovery is closed and it's already been determined that the case is proceeding to trial. But if you just read it and take 20 seconds, then obviously, unless you're drunk, you know that that's not what it says. And
Right.
that what it says is that it basically says, please file another summary judgment motion so we can get rid of this. Right?
What Shizzy had a problem with is he didn't know what without prejudice means. And by the way, if you don't know what it means, just go to Google. It'll tell you. So he got it wrong. By the way, if you go to my site, it's behind the paywall. So
I was just going to plug it. Go ahead.
Right. $5.99 a month. I had a long emailed interview with Shizzy. He's quite a guy. He was very respectful and whatnot. And so we got into that about his legal interpretation. It was funny. He said, you should talk to a lawyer. And I said, you probably should have taken your advice before you made your legal analysis. So, look, the other thing I'll say about the Hales crew, they all act very nastily. They act like they are smarter than you, better than you.
Yes.
Yeah, and Megan wasn't like that at all. She is now. She, to me, in emails, made a big deal about this thing from 2022, like I had betrayed her, and she never cared until now. She called me a scumbag, a victimizer, and she knows what happened in the relationship.
Like she kept that in her pocket to the right moment.
Right. She never cared until now. And people who know both of us know she never cared. She's become a nasty person. Tug is nasty. Hales himself is nasty. And this guy Shizzy is nasty as well. They're all nasty. And I don't know why they think that's the way to go, because it doesn't really attract people in general.
Well, Mike, they're making a lot of money right now. That's
Right.
all they're thinking about.
Well, I got to ask, how are you and your co-host of your podcast? You run a podcast called The Unknown Podcast? Am I mistaken?
Right.
And
Rick,
your co-host is
Rick Lutman.
How are you two handling the onslaught of, doxing and everything, the insults that are coming your way? How are you two handling that now when you guys have not even totally set foot on one side or the other? You're still gathering facts at this point, right?
Right. So first of all, when we interviewed Bruce, at one point, he and Rick were debating, and Rick was a lawyer. He had some very serious legal problems. He's not a lawyer anymore, but he's got the lawyer knowledge. They were going back and forth, and Bruce, pretty exasperated, said, you represent the other side better than the other side represents itself. So the idea that we were like in the tank for Bruce is patently ridiculous. Rick loves it, I'll tell you. And they're going after him. He spent 4 years in federal prison. I've interviewed him about it. I've asked him about it. I haven't examined the case to say whether or not it's true what he says, but he insists that he did nothing wrong, that he was set up. That's entirely possible. I really don't care. If he was guilty, he served his time. Now he's moving on.
Good way of looking at it.
Right. What they're attacking me for was more personal, so it was unnerving initially. I had moments where I thought maybe I made a mistake. This was dead and buried. All right. What happened in 2022 was well in the past. Nobody was going to bring it up and talk about it. And I knew that if I was going to cover this with the Hales case, I would have to talk about it. So I made the decision that I had to disclose it because, well, number one, if I didn't, Megan would. But number two, I can't go out there and say, here's why I'm doing this without pointing out that this is what I did and this is what Megan did for me. So I knew it would come out. I'll tell you, after a couple of days, it really didn't matter. They're attacking me. I went on 2 Lees in a Pod. I used to mispronounce it to Bruce all the time. He got mad. 2 Lees in a Pod, and it was the first thing after that she asked me a little bit about my background. It's the first thing I said, and now they're attacking me based on what I said. All right, well, that's not much of an attack. All right. I already admitted it. So a couple of days I didn't like it, but now it doesn't. Look, I've been threatened by gangsters. I've had a lot of different things that have happened in my career. I can handle a few insults. It's personal. This is they're not talking about simply professional dispute when they're going after you. This is a relationship that bore a child, who's alive and very young right now. So that part is a little bit difficult, but as I said, after a couple of days, it wasn't a big deal. Rick doesn't care. He, you're attacking him for going to jail. That's all over the internet in the 5 million different places. You're not breaking any new ground. You're not going after him for anything that he did. Shizzy pointed out, he made in private that got leaked, an anti-Semitic statement in 2017 that he'll have to deal with.
Yes.
And so he loves the joust. I like the joust. I don't, I didn't like that Megan called me a scumbag victimizer for a lot of reasons, but mostly who it came from. When Tug said it, I didn't care.
Yeah.
But you've known me for over a decade. You really think I'm a scumbag victimizer? Because if you did, why'd you stay friends with me for so long?
Right.
Why didn't you point this out any time before now? She doesn't have a reason. I talked to a mutual friend today who said, I was there at the time that you told her. I can tell you she didn't care. She doesn't care. This is all contrived. 100% this rage that she suddenly has that 3 years ago I entered into a relation. I didn't, they said I impregnated a victim or a witness. I started a relationship and was living with someone who I had covered and continued to cover at times. And by the way, I didn't give her this enormous, overwhelming coverage because even though I was in a relationship with her, the story did have a lot of stuff that didn't completely look right. So I didn't give it an enormous amount of coverage anyway. So if you want to attack me for my ex-girlfriend, so be it. But I was the one who disclosed it. You're not coming up with anything new.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter if you preempted. They act like you were trying to hide it anyway for their benefit of it.
Again, I made the proactive choice to get involved with this, and I had to disclose it. So
hey, I want to remind everybody about your adoption story because Mike did his most recent story yesterday was about the fake. Well, it wasn't fake. It was actually filed an emergency adoption custody petition. Supa Dave, that you remember,
right? Right.
Correct.
So
that needed to be called out.
I have a term that I use, scumbag lawyer, which may be why Megan used the term scumbag, and she knows that because we had that as a segment when we worked together. And so this lady, Jenny Consuega, got in touch with Olga Nelson, who is the biological aunt of the adopted daughter of Michelle Preston.
She's so beautiful, Miss Nelson.
Yeah, let me tell you. So using entirely Hale's contact as the reasons why custody needs to be switched, and using the term upon information and belief, which is the legal equivalent of according to anonymous sources, she files this petition, and using as evidence YouTuber content from a YouTuber who is suing the adoptive parents, I think is pretty bad. But that's not actually the really bad part. So first, she claims that she has standing as the biological aunt of an adopted child. Well, she doesn't. Her brother, and she's on the paternal side, lost custody. He terminated his parental rights. So even though she's the biological aunt, according to the law, she has no more standing than me or you or Bruce.
Or the mailman.
So then, or the mailman. So knowing that probably was a very weak argument, she then comes up with she is also fictive kin. Now, fictive kin is a non-relative, but someone who spent so much time with the child that they have an emotional attachment. So if your neighbor is constantly taking care of your child, they could in some cases, file for custody in the right circumstances and argue they are fictive kin. The biological aunt who maybe saw the child at the hospital before Michelle picked her up, and maybe not. But even if let's give her the benefit of the doubt, you saw her once at the hospital and has not seen her since, is not fictive kin. So on both elements, and that's the reason standing is very important in the legal world, because it's why I can file this. So since she had no standing and this woman knew she
That's what happened. Okay, now I'll refresh.
Yeah, I
Well,
completely
it was good
apologize.
timing. At least Mike got to sign off.
Yeah, I felt bad because we were running out of time.
There we go. Now I finally got refreshed. Okay, good.
Is the
So
stream
yeah,
back up?
I think so.
Let me just double check. Okay, stream
is.
is back up. Awesome. I apologize, everybody. A brand new computer. I'm in the middle of a conversation and it completely just zonked out on me. So I apologize. It's not the first. That's the second time while I've had you on, Bruce, that has happened.
That's all right. No, listen, I'm glad we got through. We really got through all the topics, and it was good. It's really great that we got a journalist like Mike Volpe on this story and all the different stories. I mean, there's so many stories within the big story.
I've became a big fan of his. Just reading his Substack articles, he has a way about writing, and he's so
very declarative and straightforward.
And I like his co-host, Luthman. Very direct, honest. How did you handle your jousting with him?
Yeah, they were tough in the interview, but yeah, I think I said I got a little hot under the collar once or twice, but look, I think they've come at the time. Certainly, Luthman hadn't really looked too closely at the whole thing, and now he's certainly gotten a lot more immersed in it, and it's pretty clear what's going on. And we came up with a word for it. My goodness, it's a perfect word, polymop, and it's exactly what's going on. The litigation is a key part of the whole thing. It's a symbiosis between the YouTube content and the litigation. So he creates the storylines on YouTube, and they fulfill it with the litigation, and then the litigation creates ongoing, fresh, compelling litigation-related content. Even motions for extension of time become an instant stream on 5 channels. I mean, it's just got this story has legs and so much interest. So they're doing it to make proceedings, to create issues for the sake of creating issues and proceedings, not because there's any merit to the claims, as we've seen already. Extortion, the whole basis of the Bad Neighbors fake storyline was extortion. That's been thrown out of court. He basically said that there's no way he expects them to be able to support tortious interference. So he'll see what they come up with. And now on this defamation, renew your motion for summary judgment at the end of discovery. And we plan to do that. In the meantime, they're polymopping in state court with this stupid sanctions motion on the thumbnails case, which is how can you find a case frivolous that hasn't even been litigated on its merits, and by the way, will be being litigated on its merits in federal court while they're trying to get a state court judge to rule that it's frivolous. It just makes no sense. And my prediction is there will not be any hearing about their sanctions motion on April 16th or ever, or at least until after the claims are adjudicated in federal court, and then maybe they'll revisit whether it was frivolous. But that's my prediction. You could say you heard it here first.
I got to ask you, though, on a personal level, Bruce, how are you holding up?
I'll tell you what, thanks for asking. It's, it's a stressful case, let's face it. And, they're getting every chance they can to come up with what they can come up with. And I think the expectation is they won't come up with anything. But it becomes like a full, almost a full-time job, just one case, which is not really, practical. I have quite a lot of clients and, an active practice. And so this really, it really eats into that. But look, this is an egregious abuse of the courts, of litigation, exploitation of proceedings. It is harmful. It is consumes, resources, and it's all for profit for the people doing it. And there's two people doing it.
Do you agree with Michael when he says he thinks elements of this case are going to be taught in law school somewhere down the road?
There's plenty of material for it. Let's put it that way. And let me tell you, there's very unique things about this case, so that would make it ideal, as law school case law or case examples. One, when have you ever heard of a celebrity being a stalker of private victims? It's unheard of. So that's a huge, reversal of what's typical. Usually you have private people stalking a celebrity because they're obsessed, or they're stalking a former lover, because they were jilted, the two most common scenarios.
Yes.
So this is historic in that respect. And as I was saying earlier with Mike, there is absolutely nothing like this. There has never, I'm telling you, you can, if this case becomes, more like publicized out of the YouTube verse, or out of the, what the hell's Bad Neighbors YouTube verse, and other lawyers start to hear about it, maybe, there'll be some coverage in the legal media, especially when we file a big federal lawsuit, but no lawyer will have ever seen anything like this clear, open, obvious, glaring abuse of the courts and litigation so they can create YouTube stories. That's what this is. It's as simple as that. It's obvious, and it's there for everyone to see. And by the way, just listen to the words out of his own mouth over and over and over, bragging about using the courts, not for meritorious claims, but to get back at people and to bankrupt them and to cause them financial burden. I mean, there'll never be a case like the one we're going to file with as much admissions out of the mouth of the defendant, judicial admissions.
What do you say when the rumors are that this YouTuber has backed off of his primary targets, I'll call them, and has now took to Lisa Lee and has now set targets or set sights on Lisa Lee as a new target? Do you find any validity to that statement?
Of course, whatever creates content, and that's a good one, and so she's a natural target, because she's covering the case critically. She's the only YouTube channel, Dooley's is the only YouTube channel that has extensively, made this the subject of their focus of coverage. Of course, not to shortchange your coverage, Supa Dave, at all, but this is, objective coverage. It's necessary to meet the lies, the propaganda, the fake storylines with the truth, and that's what they do. And thank goodness, because without them, it would be so one-sided. It's still terribly lopsided, and that's because there's so many surrogates making money off of it that at his pleasure, as long as they don't say a critical thing, because they know they'll get struck like you did, like MLS did, and so they're just in it for the money.
Speaking of
and that's what going after Lisa's about, just more content, more content.
You mentioned surrogates, and I'm not like that. I would like to say, out of that whole handful, I think there are a few of them who have talent. I'm going to give you the chance right now. Do you have anything good to say, as opposed to always talking crap about sides on sides? Do you think any of that channel's surrogates have any talent? And if so, who do you think you could get along with?
I plead the fifth.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
Well, look, I could give you a better answer than that. Look, I mean, there's three main channels that are really the big ones that he mentions, and he goes on theirs and they come on his, and those are Megan and Tug and Shizzy. And Tug is 100% what the hell's all the time. It's always Rex, the lawyer, and it's always Shara drops a video that becomes a big story, even though it's a bunch of nothing. So there's absolute no conscientious coverage whatsoever. It's just 100% riding, milking the gravy train on the part of Tug. No integrity whatsoever. He's not stupid. He knows what's going on, and he knows what he's doing, and he's just making a lot of money off of the story. As far as Megan goes, Mike knows a lot more, about her in her days of being a real journalist than I ever would. So I'll defer to what he said, but same thing. I mean, she sacrificed any integrity that she had as a journalist. Her reputation will never recover from this if she wants to do anything serious in the future. If anybody wants to undercut her, they'll just show her doing yoga and laughing when my client is distressed, laughing at her distress, stuff like that, and just her whole shameful foray into this story. And
how is your client holding up these days?
Well, hang on, let me
morale
get
is.
to Shizzy.
Yeah, I
Let me
apologize.
finish. Yeah, and
Apologize.
then there's Shizzy, who I don't know what kind of a life this guy has, but he apparently spends hours a day streaming and then other hours offline writing these stupid open letters. And so I just don't know what else he does with his life. It's pretty pathetic, and he gets drunk too, and then he just can't have an actual conversation like with Mike Volpe as a journalist trying to get a genuine comment out of him. It's got to be just more of this stupid fancy what he is like. It's like middle school essayist
Yeah.
writing is what it is, and he thinks that it's like clever or something, and it's pretty pathetic. So anyway, you asked, and there's
I
my
was just
answer.
wondering, how are your clients? How's their morale these days? Since the channels have started doing content on this, and you've come on board, do you think
Right.
It has made a difference to their morale at all?
I think so. I mean, look, who else can possibly relate to what they've been put through and what they're still being put through? It's unprecedented. And but here's the difference. Look, as of around March of last year, all they were hearing about was how they were going to get steamrolled in federal court and they're going to have their child taken. And and since then, a lot of things have changed, and there's a community of support, and that has made the world of difference for them. And so their morale is they're persevering, they're living their lives, and unfortunately there's a ton of distractions, and there's a ton of time consumption, and there's a ton of stress, and it's all from one source, and we know what that is, and it's going to be dealt with legally, and it is being dealt with legally. They're wonderful people, and they never asked for this.
That is 100% true, and it seems like those people that are actually wanting to hop on board and actually investigate this thing, if you don't come to the same conclusion that they want you to come to, you're just as bad as they are, and that's just not normal. There's something not right about that, and I think Michael Volpe has experienced that. I think his co-host has experienced that, and I think it's just going to take some more time before people start seeing this and waking up to it. And as this snowball starts going downhill, it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is just I keep saying how much more can come from this. And even Guapo was saying there's so much more still to come. And I'm like, wowzers,
Yeah. It would be great if there was a big lawyer law tuber who wanted to cover even just the lawyer angles of this, because there's a lot of lawyer stories within this story. There's a lot of lawyer stories about Larry Foreman. There's a lot of lawyer stories about this Miami law firm of Jenny Consuegra. To cover for a lawyer who wants that kind of an angle to sort of find as a way to get involved. And it's a shame that there isn't one big one, with hundreds of thousands of subscribers that have already, that has decided to, basically cover it, objectively, find their own niche, but objectively. And I think that's inevitable, though. I think it's inevitable. Just when, who knows? But I think it's inevitable that more and more are going to start to cover it.
Is it true that you sent a notice of preservation of evidence to the Miami attorney?
It is true.
And what's the repercussions if they do not preserve said evidence?
Hard to say, but there could be serious repercussions. There's
like contempt. Would be.
I don't know about contempt necessarily, but there's ethical rules about it, and there's also there could be presumptions in litigation that go against you. Like you lose the benefit of the doubt, or the other side can get the benefit of the doubt on something because you lost the evidence or destroyed it. But I'm not assuming that's going to happen. Look, they're a law firm and they know better. We don't know exactly how much they were in touch, if at all, with Hales, but we have our suspicions, and what we do know is enough. And what that is that it was I would say borderline fraud on the court filing, but it was clearly a frivolous filing, and it was done in fulfillment of YouTube content, and it terrorized people, and that was the point. And they made it possible. They used their law license to make it possible, and they took money to do it.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Bruce, do you have anything you want to let the viewers know right at this time? I've took so much of your time, and I feel so bad for Michael, man. I really, guys, make sure you guys check out Mike's Go Get Funding. Check out his Substack. The man is brilliant. I can't say enough.
I would
good
ask
things
Dave
about
if you just put all the links under here, like to his funding and his Substack, but also to the link of the document, the chronology document for the
It's already
macaroni
down
and
there.
cheese.
It's already down
Great.
there.
And within that document at the very top is a link to the Google Drive, which has all the transcripts and stuff that's referenced within that chronology document. So anybody who really wants to dig into it can, and they
Guys,
can also
read
contact
up on
me.
it.
Yeah, if especially if there's someone out there who's interested in doing their own sort of coverage on it, or they know a journalist or a lawyer or somebody, feel free to get in touch with me. I'm eager to see it grow, the story grow.
It really is fascinating. We only had so much time to talk about so many topics today, so I really there's just so much to that story, and there's so many players, and when you're starting talking judges and law firms, and there's just so much to it. You guys really got to check it out. It's fascinating, even though
And
it's
it's how I
2
came
years
to the
back.
What the Hell's case too. Remember, I was
Yeah.
trying to find a coverage of the macaroni and cheese, but that's how I noticed this story, and so there's a connection there. That's how I came to this whole thing, and that's why I'm a lawyer, representing Preston and Cook now.
For sure. Bruce, I can't thank you enough for coming on. Guys, show some love to Bruce. Hearts in chat for Bruce. And with that, I won't take any more of your time, Bruce. I wish you nothing but the best of luck, and I'm here if you ever need me.
Thanks, Supa Dave.
Have a good one. Guys, that, of course, was the one and only... Oh, let me just fix that, guys. I apologize. That was Bruce. And Bruce is almighty in this case. Let me go to the chat. Let's see what the chat thinks, guys. I apologize, guys. Brand new computer, still working things out. I cannot believe a brand new computer, over $1,000 I paid for this thing, and it straight up blue screened on me. Definitely not something I was expecting. So I apologize for that. Lots of hearts in chat for Bruce. So Christy said, "Great job, Dave." Oh, thank you. Marla said, "Thank you, Michael, Bruce, and Dave." I really, really enjoy Michael and Bruce for that matter. It was interesting to hear Mike's take on it. Somebody so fresh to this case. I hate that he gets this rap of somebody that's taking one side when he's really just in the fact gathering stage of everything. It's fascinating to me. So, guys, what's going on? I got a couple minutes. I'll chat it up with you guys a little bit. Did I show you guys the studio? I got a new desk now, so I'm pretty proud of it. I just wanted to show you guys. Take a look at the new desk. I'm very wide now, guys. It's a lot of space for me. One would say this is more space than I need, but it's fun, it makes me feel like I'm in a
You're
spaceship.
awesome.
Great content as always, Dave.
That is a $20 super chat from Christy that says, "Great content as always, Dave." Thank you. I apologize for the audio there. I was getting a hum, a hissing in the background, and I noticed it stopped after Mike was on. So I don't know if that was because of Mike's headphones, but when me and Bruce were chatting, I wasn't getting any hum or anything. And if you guys can go back in the interview, I was checking all my cables during the interview to check and see if that hum was coming from me. But I don't think it was, so I apologize for that. We're gonna keep working things out. I did an interview today, guys. It's members only right now. I interviewed the bearded fisherman, and it was a hoot. Talking to Mike the bearded fisherman was quite interesting. I learned a lot about the man. Ray Bone Crusher says, "Dave, I'm using an old fold-up card table in my garage." For sure. Before that, Ray, I had this little mini, like, kid's desk, and it was on wheels. And then I put my new monitor stand on it, and the desk was tipping over because there was so much weight from the monitors. So I was like, I gotta spring and get a new desk. So, but thanks to the viewers like you, the MILTOWN'S Best coffers are allowing me to do things like this. So it comes in handy. I see John is in chat. John German is in chat. Hello, John. I hear John has been talking to some awesome content creators. So that's cool to hear. What else do we got going on here in the chat? Connie, what's 100% true? Did I miss something? If he wasn't making money, he wouldn't broadcast. Who? Not me. I broadcast regardless. It's just awesome that you guys watch. $287 motion, only 15 pages, not transcripts from YouTube lives. Okay. Well, yeah, 2 leads tonight. That'll be interesting. That's the Creative Crafter. Guys, check out the Creative Crafter. What did I miss here in the chat, guys? Oh, they're talking about Lisa. Lisa's doing a good job. Thank you. Thank you. Marla said she loved my interview with Bearded Fisherman. That was a kind of a spur of the moment thing. We were talking about getting that interview done for a long time. And yeah, I think my next interview, if he is going to be willing, is going to be Ed Warrior. We all know Ed Warrior. He's in the chat right now. And I really want to interview Ed. I know Ed was talking about he needs batteries. I think that was Ed that said he needs batteries for his mobility scooter. So I kind of want to do something to get Ed some batteries for his mobility scooter. I think that would really help him out. And maybe a nice little interview with Ed would be awesome. If you guys would like to see an interview with Ed Warrior, put a 1 in chat just so I know if you guys are down for that. I'm sure he has a great story to tell. And yes, guys, again, if you guys check out Michael Volpe's Go Get Funding page, his Substack, the man writes awesome articles. Ed says, I don't need to be interviewed. I want to hear your story, Ed. I think a lot of people would love to hear your story. Look at Christy wants to see it. Ray wants to see it. Jackie wants to see it. Kristen wants to see
awesome!
it. Marla.
11 quadrillion 111 trillion 111 billion 111 million 111,111.
You tell him, British guy. That's how much Marla wants to see it. I see Concerned Planet. Ed said 3. Did I miss super chats? What super chats did I miss? Let's take a look here. I see a $20 super chat from Christy Nunya. Great content as always, Dave. $10 super chat from Marla. Is that all I can go back to? That's all I can go back to. Let me check this real quick, guys. 1 second. I will go back as far as I can in my studio. I will try this, guys. Give me 1 second while I pull it up. It's cool that I can actually do this stuff now with my new computer. I can actually pull stuff up. Okay, so I see 20 Kristen 199 super chat from Kristen that says, guess I am Ed 2. Ed Warrior with a $2 super chat saying donating to Dave because I'm a fool. And that's when Kristen said she is too. $4.99 super chat from Tiny Tim that says nothing. Thank you, Tiny Tim. And Mo sent a $10 super chat that said booyah, Supa Dave. I believe that is all of them. Nope. And then there was, yep, that was all of them. So I got them all. Look at me over here, guys. I want to thank all of you for your support. Guys, I'm loving content again. These interviews, they're rejuvenating me. They're making me feel so alive again. Being able to broadcast from this, it's so fun. It's fun again. And I feel, except for that little snafu with me getting the blue screen today, I don't know what that was all about. I guess I got to break this thing in like a pair of shoes or something. But it sure was fun, guys. I'm having so much fun with the content. And let's keep them coming. Let's keep these interviews rolling. Let's keep the good times going, guys. We don't need all this hatred and nonsense. If you guys watch my interview with Bearded Fisherman, which right now it is members, but I think I might make it public. If you guys watch that interview with Mike, the Bearded Fisherman, it was so positive. We were talking about recovery, talking about making life better, making better decisions. And that's what life should be about, guys. You know, yes, we're dealing with a legal case that is very dark in a lot of aspects. But if I can be a little bit of humor or, you know, some sunshine in your day, that would be all I ask, you know. John says, you have a special interviewing talent, and we love the content. Thank you so much. Concerned Planet says, let's save the world. And sometimes that's how I feel, guys. I really feel like I want to save the world. I want to save you guys. Let me save you. I'm like that one girlfriend that's like, I can fix him. I can fix him. Chrissy says, you are a great interviewer, Dave. You know, I don't know if you guys have been with my channel for long, but I used to interview, and there was a time when I didn't give anybody time to answer questions. I didn't. I was so nervous. I'm not good with people, but you guys have told me to calm down, let people say their piece, and when they're done talking, then you can start your next question. So I'm at that point with my interviewing where I'm like, they'll tell me when they're ready for their next question, and it was awesome. Connie says, Dave, I was not referring to you. Another subscriber and I were discussing the YouTuber. Oh, okay. Fair enough, guys. Fair enough. But with all that being said, guys, I don't got much else for you today. We got a lot of streamers coming up today. I believe Lisa will be streaming. I hope Ray is going to be streaming. Darwin has been doing really good streams lately. Ray's streams have been phenomenal lately. It was good to see a new face on Ray's stream the other day. It's good to see him busting into his interviewing chops. And it's all good. We're all having fun. Ed said, if I ever agreed to an interview, you will not see my face. That's perfectly fine, Ed. We don't need to see your face. We do not need to see your face. That is, I'm all for just hearing your story. Darwin says, you have to have fun in what you do. And I agree, because sometimes when it's not fun anymore, what's the point, you know? And for a while there, the videos weren't fun. For a minute there, I was so sick of them. I was so sick of bad news after one bad story after another. You know, what's gonna be next? What's the bad news of the day? And who's gonna gang up on me today for just thinking? Thanks everyone for hanging out with Dave. I agree. Thank you, Tiny Tim. Tiny Tim, you're awesome. You all are awesome, and I love you all. So I think I'm gonna get out of here. So with all that being said, I love you guys. Today, tell somebody else you love them too, because they may need to hear it, and I'm serious about that. Peace, y'all.